The fog seeped through the rotten rooftops of the town on the mountain slope, smothering the dim lights of the street lamps. The cobblestone streets gave off a smell mixed with mud, and the silence of the night was accompanied only by the howl of the wind and a distant, muffled moan that disturbed the soul. The tavern, standing defiant against the wind in the center of the town, with its sooty windows and faded wooden sign, looked almost like the house of a ghost. Inside, the dance of orange flames spreading from the pitch-black fireplace cast shapes on the walls reminiscent of monstrous shadows. This place, a refuge for weary bodies and forgotten souls, echoed throughout the night with the clinking of glasses, half-finished sentences, and laughter lost in mouths. At that moment, the door suddenly opened, and as a figure stepped into the dim light with heavy, creaking footsteps, the conversations inside abruptly stopped. A few who lifted their heads immediately dropped their eyes to the floor, while a strange mixture of familiarity and unease appeared on the bartender's face. Because the man who entered the door, with his black cloak over his armor, his helmet shine dulled, and the sword hanging on his back, looked like he had emerged from a dark legend. Everyone knew him by only one name, Black Knight, and he did not speak, or if he did, only death whispered behind his words. But that night was different, because the knight silently sat at the table in the farthest corner. The metallic scraping sound of his armor sent shivers down everyone's spine. A glass of wine was brought before him, without him raising a hand. For a while, he just drank. Then the bartender slowly approached and touched the empty chair beside him. "Today, the town is quieter. Those screams again," he whispered. The Black Knight slowly lifted his head. There was only darkness in his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he parted his lips, and his voice was like the grinding of a rusty chain. "Those screams, are they still there?" he asked. The bartender paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. After every full moon, animals disappear. People silently leave their homes. As the mountain vomits those sounds, this place dies more and more," he said. The Black Knight sighed deeply, then leaned in a little closer and began to speak. "I will tell you something. If you listen, maybe you'll understand, maybe nothing will change, but I have to tell it," he said. The bartender flinched a little, because even the stories from the Black Knight's past were enough to drive people mad. The knight continued. "Years ago, under the shadow of the mountains above this town, there was a forgotten cave. The elders called it the Blood Reservoir. There was gold inside, and a lot of it. Even the king had his eye on it, but no one dared to go deep, because those who entered never came out again, or they did, they had no tongue and carried endless darkness in their eyes. Then one night, the screams began, such screams that resembled neither man nor beast, moans coming from a rotten throat, voices asking for help but cursing at the same time. The voices were cursing. The king finally lost his patience and gave me a task. 'Find the source of these screams and extract the gold,' he said. So I gathered 40 men, master warriors from different places, different backgrounds, but none of them could hide the silent fear growing inside as we approached the cave. Along the way, they didn't laugh, didn't joke. Even when they prayed, their words got mixed up because the mountain was watching them from afar, as if even the rocks were breathing. When we arrived at the cave, the entrance was filled with animal bones. The bodies of birds hung upside down, and the skins of foxes were turned inside out. It was some kind of warning, but we went inside because we were ordered and we were honorable." The Black Knight paused here, pressing his fingers on the table. "When we stepped inside, at first there was only darkness, then within the darkness, eyes. No, there were not eyes, gazes. Things felt deeply from a heart and sounds. Only one could hear at a time. One felt as if hearing his father's name, another heard the song of his dead wife. The cave was playing with us, calling us. Then the first loss happened. By morning, the leader of the vanguard was gone. Only his armor remained, and inside the armor, a heart, a beating heart. The next day, another disappeared, then another. The deeper we went, the more the losses increased, the sounds rose. The stone walls began to beat like a pulse. We found a mine. Yes, the walls were filled with pure gold veins, but even it no longer seemed valuable because one by one my men were being drawn into the darkness. Some disappeared suddenly, some screamed, and then were never heard again. In the end, I was alone, but I was not alone," he said. The bartender involuntarily stepped back. The Black Knight's face was still beneath shadows. but his voice came from deeper within, almost as if he had transformed into another being. Finally, I saw it, what emerged from the darkness and appeared before me. God be my witness. What I saw was not a being. It was the shape of a thought of hatred, fear, hunger. It was a very mistake forgotten within the universe. It was taller than a man, but not like a body. It had long arms and fingers that moved like liquid within the darkness. But its face, that face, I will tell you, he said. The bartender wanted to look away, but could not, because the Black Knight spoke like a kind of spell, his voice now resembling the sound of a knife cutting flesh, and the shadow on the table seemed to ripple independently from a knight's movements. But this was not just a shadow, this thing. Yes, I must call it a thing now because no word in my mind like entity, creature, or demon felt sufficient. Was a consciousness inside that darkness, watching me, reading my thoughts, even acting as if it had written the past within me with its own hands, and that consciousness was now tearing the air in front of me apart and looking into my eyes. It was at that moment I saw its face. At first it looked like a void, a space darker than the emptiness we know, a face not absorbing light, but denying it. Then slowly it took shape, and that shape split in two, right down the middle, a slit opening from the nose upward and downward. Its left side was lost in black infinity, a meaningless, completely empty space, a darkness where I lost all sense of time and felt myself being swallowed. Its right side was... God, its right side was something that my mind still resists remembering, and I wake up screaming in my dreams, because that side had thousands of tiny human faces, some crying, some screaming, some just staring, but each of them seemed alive, breathing, suffering, and whispering to me. Some of the faces were children, some old, some dead, all familiar, and I remembered a few, the faces of my lost knights. That creature had devoured not only their bodies, but also their souls, locked them onto its face, made them part of its endless existence, etched them into the skin of an immortal nightmare. Before I could understand what was happening, although the creature didn't move at all, it was suddenly in front of me. I heard no sound, only a coldness, a distortion of time. Then its face was close enough to touch mine, and a glow from its chin, which had no lips, blinded my eyes. Then I felt it, my tongue, a heat, a pain, a cut, a severing. No, it was more than pain. It was the silencing of my soul, the carving my inner voice with blade. When I fell to the ground, my hands went to my mouth, but there was no blood, because my tongue was no longer there. Inside me was a void, and that void was consuming all of me. I couldn't cry, I couldn't scream, I only felt the creature looking at me. Then it took me, but my body stayed behind. No, this is hard to explain. You may not understand, but it sucked itself inside me. My identity, my essence, left my body empty, then it reached out a hand to me, or what I thought was a hand, an extension, and we formed a bond, as if a dark river poured inside me and I drowned. My eyes went dark, but I did not fall. There was only an echo inside me now, awakened by its voice. The creature spoke, not in words, but feelings. I have forgiven you, because in your eyes there was still self, it said, but was alive because forgiveness was not in its nature. It was not a creature. It was the embodiment of unforgiven feelings, cursed desires, rejected pains, and it acted as if it was going to leave me there. It turned its back, blending into the walls as if it had never existed. But I understood it had not sent me away. It was writing a story, and I was the bearer of that story. When I regained control of my body, I left the cave. Days, maybe weeks had passed, but outside time seemed frozen. The mountain slopes were silent. Even the birds no longer sang. When I returned to the village, the people could not look me in the eyes. When they realized I had no tongue, no one spoke. But over time I became a legend, known as the Black Knight. I never spoke again, but at night in my dreams that face would return to me. Those tiny human faces sang songs, and the dark side called to me. "You are now me," whispered the echoes inside me. But I waited. I was patient, because the creature left inside me not only fear, but also a piece of itself, and that piece was growing little by little every night, until this night. Yes, this night. This is why I came here, to find you, to tell you, because now I am no longer myself, but it is not outside me either, and now the time has come, bartender. We have reached the end of the story. The only thing that moved at that moment was the bartender's hand, trembling slightly, because the Black Knight's eyes no longer held that dull, blank expression they had throughout the tale. Instead, they began to shine with a deep, suffocating glow. This light was not natural, not a reflection, but leaking corruption from within, a presence growing inside. At that moment, the bartender never heard the knight's voice again, because the speech was over. The words had done their job, and the darkness had dropped its mask. The knight's head slowly tilted to the side, and from the edge of his neck, a black liquid began to ooze. But it was not blood. Heavy as smoke, viscous as poison, alive like a shadow. When the bartender blinked, the figure sitting opposite had changed shape. It was no longer the man he knew. The armor cracked, and from inside emerged a new body, bony but not organic, like the shed shell of a dead god. First, the shoulders swelled, then the helmet fell, and the face beneath. No, it was not a face, because it was many faces, the thing that made everyone in the tavern scream at once. What they faced was not the knight they knew, but the true form of that creature, with thousands of miniature human heads spinning in its eye sockets, a jawless maw split open like an endless smile, one side completely black, flickering like a starless night, the other side rotten, filled with screaming, writhing human faces. It was a formless entity, but a nightmare with form. Without hesitation, it attacked. The nearest drunkard, but it was not an attack, more like a dark liquid seeping into the man. The man trembled for a few seconds, eyes rolling back. Then his head exploded, dark smoke pouring out with small human faces screeching and scattering. The creature glided between the tables, each step calling another scream, each move tearing bodies apart and taking souls from within. Everyone tried to run, but the tavern door had turned into a stone wall. The windows opened not outside, but into infinite darkness. When someone struck a window with an axe, the glass did not shatter. It only caved in, and a mouth with eyes on glass screamed into the axe back. At that moment, everyone understood there was no escape, because this was not a massacre, but a ritual. The creature was completing itself by consuming everyone here. Every throat it slit added a new tile to the mosaics on its face. The cracking of the bones of the violinist woman was heard, and the music started again. But the violin played by itself now, the sound from strings made of nerves hitting the ceiling, turning into giggling children's voices. An old priest tried to pray, but his tongue tangled in his throat as if invisible hands stole his right to speak. Then the creature turned to him and touched his eyes. Not a touch, just a look. And the priest burned himself without hesitation, because that gaze made one deny their own existence. It was the gaze of the devil, but worse, it was the embodiment of godlessness. Everyone inside could no longer even scream. Their vocal cords seemed rotten. A mother tried to hide her child, but the child had already turned into one of the faces on the creature's face. And in the mother's eyes, her son's tiny face writhed in pain among those muffled faces. One by one, everyone fell to the ground, but before their bodies died, their souls appeared as faces on the creature's right side. Time had ceased to exist. Each second inside was like a century, and yet never passed. Sometimes the creature did not even drink its victim's blood. It only watched them, and that look was enough. Then it came for the bartender. Trembling in fear, the bartender received no harm. The creature only came close, looked into his eyes, and the bartender saw at that moment, outside the village, deep in the cave, another version of himself bore that same face as the creature. He too had been called, had already become a forgotten piece. The Black Knight was not alone. He was only the beginning, because the creature did not only collect faces from his victims. It took pieces from their past, regrets, suppressed desires, and everyone more or less had a spark of this being inside them. The bartender no longer screamed. He only cried because he understood what the creature was. This thing was the darkest part inside a human, the unatoned sins, the suppressed violence, the forgotten fears, made flesh. And the cave we called a cave was only a void open inside a body, a place anyone could enter but no one could leave. The creature suddenly took the bartender, did not strangle or cut him, only drew him inside, as if his body curled over him like an endless cloak. Silence remained in the tavern. But even that silence was a lie, because at that moment the only thing still alive inside, no, the thing, sat at the table again. The creature no longer spoke, because there was no story left to tell. The Black Knight's body was still there, but no human remained inside. His eyes drifted to the shadows on the ceiling, and from outside came a voice. Another traveler had arrived in the village. A new night was beginning. A table was ready for a new visitor, and this story had to be told once more